Hello and welcome. You are listening to an informed take on current events brought to you by law students and staff of Queen's University Belfast. This is LawPod.
Hi, welcome to LawPod. We're the QUB Gender Network. I'm Niccola Parkes.
And I'm Amy Coulter.
We're a gender steering committee that campaigns and focuses on women's issues on campus. This year, our themes are women in the criminal justice system. So if you like what we say, then like us on Facebook and Instagram.
Today we're going to be doing a review on the RBG documentary at the Queen's Film Theatre in ahead of the viewing on the 10th of January at 6 p.m. that's going to have a panel which will include Honourable Mrs Justice Keegan, the Chair of the Law Society, Susanne Rice, Dr Catherine McNeely from QUB School of Law, who contributed to the feminist judgments. And we just want to say a huge thank you to QFT for hosting and organising this event.
So RGB is about Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, who is currently serving on the US Supreme Court. She is a judge who has cared and advocated for feminist issues for over 3 decades. And she is still currently fighting for gender equality.
So we went to see the film on Friday at the premiere at the QFT, and
it was amazing. I had the full intention of going and writing so many notes. However, halfway through, I kind of forgot about that because I was just so focused on what she was saying and how she kind of went through her entire life. She's incredible, and she's an incredible role model.
Yeah, both of us, we came in with our pens and we scribbled for about the first half an hour, and then literally we just sat eyes wide open. And I think the thing we said to both of us afterwards was how inadequate we felt.
She has an incredible work ethic. Like, it kind of made me feel slightly inferior. I don't know when she sleeps.
She doesn't. It says that she works all week and then she catches up for her sleep on the weekend.
I could not do it.
No, and she went through her law school career with a young child and her sick husband doing all of her work, doing his work.
He was also a student at Harvard Law as well.
And she somehow was able to make the
Harvard Law
Review in her second year. And I can hardly keep up with my deadlines.
I know.
So the biggest thing that we found after the film was what actually Ruth Bader Ginsburg means to be a feminist in the 21st century. Even though she's 84 years old, she still relates to feminism in society today.
She still is very current and very relevant in what she's doing and the work that she's doing as well.
She's a meme. She's the notorious RBG.
She has T-shirts.
And mugs.
And mugs.
She, the first thing that hit me was whenever it was like not very long into the film, like 5 minutes into the film, and she said that her mum always taught her to be ladylike. And I think as contemporary feminists of today, we have been taught to hate that word, as in...
Yeah, I wasn't sure where that was going.
Yeah.
Like, there's such kind of... There are connotations that I don't necessarily want to associate with ladylike.
But then she went on to teach us that being ladylike means not to give in to emotions, that instead of reacting in anger, you're going to lose an opportunity to teach someone. And I think that was really reflected in her relationships with like her adversaries, like Justice Scalia, who she has befriended, and there became the most unlikely friendship ever. And she says that she felt like she was teaching kindergarten whenever she was, wasn't that whenever she was...
Yeah, when she was trying to debate and discuss with slightly more right-leaning people, she kind of, and people on the Supreme Court as well, she kind of felt like she was leading them through like kindergartners.
Yeah, I think that relates a lot to what feminism means in the 21st century, because I think one of the biggest struggles people face with saying they're a feminist is people have this image of like
the stereotype,
man-hating, burn your bra, like you hate all men.
This constantly angry person that always has something to fight against and is almost slightly unreasonable in their kind of quest.
Yet she was this timid, shy. Like, I went in not really knowing much about Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and I imagined her to be this like ferocious, like leader, and yet she was
really reserved.
Yeah, everybody said about how she was like, you could hardly like spark an emotion out of her. She was quiet, yet she was able to like move the women's rights movement by like just her writing and how she speaks, and just also I think it's a love story between her and her husband.
I really found that the idea of being ladylike interesting in terms of how people react today to different discourses and narratives. And I think everyone is angry about something and doesn't necessarily approach things with the kind of calmness and rationality that she does. And I think that's one thing that everyone should and needs to take away with them, is how to talk to someone you don't necessarily agree with without shouting and screaming and punching walls and whatever else.
Yeah, I think that was seen in her dissenting opinion of Trump, and but then she came back and she apologized. Like, I think like that would be hard to do. And she was able to do that with grace, and she's able to like move an entire courtroom with being so still and so like, whenever they said that she was never supposed to be the great dissenter, yet she's been able to come in here, and whenever she writes a judgment, whenever she writes a dissent in judgment, like the internet explodes. And
she's very dignified about it.
Yeah.
Like, she's managed to kind of go high, in the words of Michelle Obama. She represents that, and I think we need that now more than ever.
Definitely. She's definitely an inspiration. I think like any male or female should definitely go and see the film in all aspects, especially like what we said about her work ethic. Like, I came out wanting to go straight to the library and never sleep and just work as hard as I can.
I felt that, although that did not happen.
No.
I went straight to bed.
I think as well, one of the biggest things that we felt from the film was her relationship with her husband.
It was a very equal relationship, which I think people still struggle with now. Like, at times, she did stay home and she looked after her child and she looked after her husband, and that was that very kind of stereotyped role that she fit into. But then other times, it was reversed. Her husband stayed at home and allowed her to focus on her career without any kind of resentment or hate towards her.
Yeah, she followed him because they both went to Harvard and he graduated, and then he got a job in New York as a tax lawyer, and so she left Harvard, picked up her life and moved and to New York to follow him, and then graduated from Columbia.
So sweet.
And then she was able to like follow him, as in wasn't he noted as one of the best tax lawyers in the whole of New York, which is like really saying something. She followed him, and then whenever her time came, whenever the women's rights movement came, he recognised that this was important and took a step back, which is amazing to do, which to be that selfless for another person. Like, I don't know if half the men out there would be comfortable today with stepping back and letting their wife be the sole breadwinner.
Yeah.
And that was able to be accomplished in the 1950s. Like, that's amazing.
It was incredible. Like, I still think there are people that cling on to those ideas of where women should be in society and within their own lives. And I think she didn't have any expectation of what she wanted her life to be, and she just did what she was good at, which I think everyone should do.
Yeah,
if you're good at something, go for it.
She said she just fell in love with the law and it all followed. I also think that he is a big role model for feminism for males as well.
Yeah, and like, how it can be done and how it should be done.
Yeah, and that it's not about this power struggle between the two sexes. It's about equal opportunities everywhere.
And respect.
Yeah.
Like, it was so evident in the documentary that he respected her as a human being because of what she was doing, because who she was. And they were very different personalities. He was really funny and really loud and verbose, and she was very reserved and calm and shy, and they balanced each other out well. Yeah,
because I think that was really evident whenever President Clinton, she was on the list to be the nominee for the Supreme Court, and didn't she say on the list at the start she was like 26 choice? She was like, they thought she was too old, there was no point. And then Marty became her like cheerleader, and
he became her publicist. Like, he pushed her for that job.
Yeah, she said he was the only reason that she got to number one, And then obviously President Clinton said he knew within 15 minutes. But she said without him, she would never have got there, which I think is amazing for her to be this feminist icon. But she has no inability to show that, you know, they both needed each other and they both were instrumental in making each other. There's no struggle there for competitivism to be better than each other. It was just mutual respect and love.
It was amazing to watch, and I think it would be the ideal for anyone.
Oh, yeah.
I was slightly jealous.
I know.
Going back to your point about the question of her being nominated for the Supreme Court, it was interesting that people thought that she was too old for it. And looking back now, it seems ridiculous that should even come up, because she was still so ferocious in...
She still is.
Yeah, in how she goes about her work. Like, there's pretty much no stopping her.
I feel like there's this massive ageism whenever it comes to females where it's non-existent for men. Like, right now, she's still being, like, doubted on if she can do this job because she's quite old. And, like, whenever Obama was in presidency, she was pushed to resign so he could assign another liberal judge, and she
so that
refused.
They could live forever.
Live forever, outlive Trump.
Yeah.
Hopefully she does, praying.
Yeah.
But I don't remember if there's ever been any male that has been questioned.
There's never any doubt that they can always, you know, keep up with their work. As they get older, they can just keep on going, and they're never questioned about the quality of their work.
Yeah.
And I think as Ruth Bader Ginsburg, you know, gets older, there is that question of the quality of what she's doing. And especially now when you have, you know, competing right-wing theories, it's hard to...
Yeah. There's this assumption, I think, that women will want to slow down later in life and, you know, spend time with their children and their grandchildren, which, of course, in the film, it shows that she has a great relationship with her children, especially her granddaughter. But that men, their work is their life and they're only going to do it until the day they die. But it's not the same for women. And I think it's really poignant in the very first question of the movie is, how's your health? And she repeats, I'm fine. And it shows so much of her.
She must get so tired
She does
of
like
answering
20
that
push-ups
question.
a day.
I can barely do one.
I can't do one. Like, so I think she was showing that she is, and she's going to do this job until she can, and she's fit and able to do it. And
I actually am really angry at when I think back at her life's work, to then have people question her and to question the quality of her work and to question whether she can still do it is just so outrageous.
Yeah, I think it's strange that how could you ever doubt someone that has achieved this much? Like, she changed the life for American women and for women everywhere.
It seems that you just can't win.
No.
Like, even if you become, you know, a justice on the Supreme Court, you still have to prove yourself. You still have to fight against all your other co-workers or your other male peers. And that just, to me, isn't very fair.
And one of the biggest things that was most important was a film that was how well Ruth Bader Ginsburg represents judicial diversity and representation. As in, the judiciary is always filled with your typical affluent, white, old...
male privilege.
Yeah, patriarchy. And how that ever is represented in today's society is beyond.
It's such a limited perspective. Like, they all come from a relatively similar background as well, and although their experiences might differ, they all represent the same perspective.
Yeah.
That doesn't account for intersectionality within society, with growing diversity.
Yeah, and it's hardly ever anyone that stands in front of the court is of their similar background. So how they're ever supposed to, you know, subjectively try and put themselves in those footsteps and understand the limited options that there were to these people whenever their backgrounds differ so much.
And I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg represents that. She kind of approached the judiciary with a whole new experience, with a whole new perspective that she was able to offer in the first kind of couple of trials that she represented. She had this outlandish idea that women were discriminated against, and it was more subtle than racism. It was this pervasive discrimination that was felt but was never really acknowledged before now.
She painted this picture as women as a minority group. And do you remember whenever there's the part of the judges saying, well, what more do you want? You know, can we not put a woman in the face of the dollar? Like, and the woman that was asking her the questions asked her, you know, how do you respond to that? And that's whenever she realizes that, you know, that discrimination against women is so subtle, and yet it's so powerful. And I think that's relevant in the cases that she took. Remember, it said in a part where she decided that she would do like a patchwork quilt of like cases that meant different things, and she would try and paint this picture. And she chose cases that not only was women were discriminated against, men as well.
She was focusing on getting gender equality.
Yeah, that it wasn't just this women's right issue, that women's rights affects everyone, and it affects men as well with that. Remember the Social Security case?
Yeah, so it was this man who had lost his wife during childbirth, but his child was completely healthy. And so he wanted to access... I think it was single mother benefits.
Yeah, Social Security.
But obviously he wasn't a single mother, so he was excluded from that social welfare.
Yet if it had been him that had have died, his wife would have been able to get those benefits, and there would be no questions asked. So she was trying to show that it affects everyone. It affects everyone. If you don't give equal rights to women, you're effectively not giving any equal rights.
Yeah.
And I think that still shows today. I think not recently she referenced her own opinion in the VMI case, remember?
Yeah.
And she has this like league of supporters now from this VMI. It's like the military institute.
The Virginia Military Institute, where 20 years ago they would only accept boys. However, the state of Virginia had outlawed single-sex education.
Yeah.
Which, funnily enough, only the girls' institutions had to be co-educational then, but it didn't include VMI.
Because this was this prestigious white male academy where it was like painted a picture of manliness. Like the images they show you are of the commanding officers screaming in the cadets' faces, and you know, recognizing that women could never
how could
this.
girly women compete with that?
Yeah, women are going to burst into tears if you scream in their face. Like they're never going to be able to withhold this.
But it took Ruth to kind of say this is wrong, for the Supreme Court to recognize that this is not equality.
And if we didn't have judicial diversity, if that was a panel of white men sitting up there, they wouldn't be able to empathize with a woman and realize that women aren't these frail, weak, passive little objects that if you shout at them, or they're not going to be able to withstand the physical aspects of it. If we didn't have her, those cases probably would end up very different.
I think she definitely opened up the floodgates for the issue of judicial representation to be acknowledged. And I think we still have a long way to go. Like, I think there's still only, one woman...
Yeah, she's the only woman in the Supreme Court
on the Supreme Court. But I did actually read a really nice article from CNN that said that somewhere in Texas had nominated like 19 black women to be judges.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean that reflects everywhere. And I think even our Supreme Court still has a lot to be desired.
Yeah, we were likening her with Lady Hale. And she's our version of our notorious RBG.
I don't think she has the kind of celebrity status that Ruth Bader Ginsburg has, though. No. I think you're only aware of Lady Hale if you're in the sector, which I think is really sad because she is an incredible woman and should be recognised as such.
Because this morning we were discussing, she'd recently wrote was it a judgment or an article on judicial diversity and how we still have a long way to go here, as in there is no one in our Supreme Court that represents any minority groups at the moment. So how are they supposed to reflect this? And
reflect society as a whole.
Especially with everything that is going on in society right now. Especially as well in America with the Trump administration.
And I think Ruth Bader Ginsburg's celebrity, and she is an icon, really touched me in a way, because I think she brings such a humanity to a period of, to me, apparent darkness.
Yeah. We're just praying she outlives the Trump administration, because she's like the beacon of light.
She represents humanity and what it should and could be. And even when I think about our own justice system where we have people like that, people who fight for people in poverty, who fight for people struggling to, immigrate here, we don't celebrate them.
No, with our refugee crisis, it's not seen as a crisis. It's seen as this problem, where we're not treating these people as humans that need help.
But I think there is like an issue with immigration, but I really dislike the Home Secretary's words of migration crisis, because these are people that are fleeing away from persecution and discrimination, and we should be helping them.
Yeah, she represents this idea of humanity where we are treating these people that need our help as actual humans fleeing problems and crisis, not these numbers. And
that's what I really struggle with. I find it absolutely disgusting how the government is treating our institutions and the people who use them with utter contempt. And even with the funding cuts that the criminal justice system has had to deal with, that's evident of how they almost despise the institutions themselves. The government aren't treating the criminal justice system with respect, and that just shows that they don't care for the vulnerable people in society who use it and who need it. If you take legal aid funding, that was cut tremendously, and so you have small and medium legal firms closing because they can't remain solvent. And who is going to represent the vulnerable people in society?
Yeah, if we don't have these heroes of legal aid and we don't have judicial reversity,
But the government doesn't even seem to be incentivized to fix that.
Yeah, that's definitely not a priority at the moment.
And in terms of funding cuts as well, that applies to women in the criminal justice system as well, which I also don't really think is fit for purpose. There's no kind of differentiation in the criminal justice system for men and women. And we have very different problems, and they should be treated as such.
Yeah, there's these gender differences, and people don't recognise that these gender differences don't mean biological differences. Whenever a woman is a victim, she's not reacting because her gender is telling her she's hysterical and
she's victimised in a certain way.
Yeah, she's seen as this emotional train wreck, this slave to her emotions. She's not seen as someone who has went through complex issues from the socioeconomic background that she's came from.
And I think it was really interesting, actually. In the documentary, there was Ruth was trying a case before the Supreme Court, and one of the justices said, "Oh, I thought you wanted gender equality. Why are you asking for difference now for women?" And I think that is kind of sums up the problem here. We should aim for gender equality, but that doesn't mean neglecting and ignoring the differences that we have. But women have different experiences, and that should be acknowledged. That should be handled and treated with respect and dignity.
Yeah, the only way to create a criminal justice system that is fit for purpose is to make it fit for everyone that it affects, women and children and men, and everyone has different experiences of how they got in there, and that a woman's experience is completely different from how a man travelled the pathway to crime. And that's not asking for any extra help, any extra
special treatment
for women. It's just
different treatment.
Yeah, it's just different, and it needs to be fit to purpose everyone. And I think that's really poignant with today's society, especially here with the prevalence of just the Ulster Rugby rape trial that just happened.
And I think that raises a good point to end on, that we can pursue activism for women through the legal system, through litigation. Yeah. There are ways that we can fight back, not just burning bras and being angry.
Yeah, I think that fits in with what was said in the film, is that Ruth fueled the revolution with lawsuits instead of protests, that she believed in incremental progress instead of bold gestures. And I think that's really leads back to what she was saying about being a lady, as in that doesn't mean that you need to sit there quietly to be seen and not heard. It just means that instead of responding with anger, because more than likely no one will listen to you, respond in a teachable way and to show people the injustices. As she said, all she asked for the patriarchy is to take their feet off our necks.
So, in the words of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, be a lady.
Thank you very much. We hope you enjoyed what you heard, and we hope to see you at the panel on the 10th, where there'll be great discussion.
You have been listening to LawPod, an informed take on current events brought to you by the law students and staff at Queen's University Belfast. This episode was produced by myself, Niccola Parkes, and Amy Coulter. Our theme music is by Colonel Chocolate and the Justice Triangle. LawPod is funded by Queen's Law School and the Queen's Annual Fund. You can follow us on social media. We are on Twitter at QUB LawPod. For more information, you can also visit our website, lawpod.org. And please have a look in the show notes for more information about the topics covered today. You can find us on iTunes or anywhere else you get your podcasts. Thanks for listening. This was LawPod.